Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Long Game podcast with myself, Ben, and Maria, who is filling in for Jason in his absence. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the presidential debate that is set to take place tonight. As of the recording of this podcast, we do not know what the outcome of that debate was. Did somebody humiliate themselves and bomb? Is the entire complexion of the race changed? Or is everything pretty much the same after a dull performance all around? We don't know, but we're going to make our predictions. And we'll also be talking about, briefly, the Maria Steen controversy and the fact that she was refused access to the nominations for the presidential election. The fact that we will not be seeing Maria on the stage tonight. So, first of all, we probably won't spend too much time on it because I think everybody's been talking about it all week. But what was your general reaction, Maria, when the other Maria was denied access to the presidential race? How do you feel, first of all, as a journalist, and second of all, as a voter?
Okay. Yeah, and I think the two things, they're just so tied in. I feel so disappointed. And I was talking to people this past weekend. I was at a wedding, and this is even in the north. This is such big news that I think people really had their hopes up. A lot of people were surprised that she didn't get on the ballot. I think even with tonight, with the debates, it would have been so good to have someone out there to platform, views that the public aren't hearing, that people aren't hearing, conservative views, someone who represents family values, someone who looks and presents themselves so well and is, I think, a really great example to women and to young women. And represents, the non-conformist view, and people have been denied a chance to hear her present those views. I think, today, it just feels really disappointing because the race so far has just been, as we've talked about, as you've talked about, and as John and Sarah have talked about on their podcast, it's been so bland, it's been so vanilla, so boring. I mean, I think Maria Steen with with her Birkin bag, the Hermes bag last week, that was the most exciting thing to happen so far, I think, in the whole presidential race. It was the most talked about thing. It brought a bit of discussion. It was, brought a bit of colour to the whole thing. And I think she would have brought charisma and grace. And yeah, I feel pretty much similar. That's my view, I suppose, more my personal view. As a journalist, I feel the same way. I feel that the barriers raised against her were just so unfairly high, and we've suffered, and democracy has suffered because she was blocked from going on the ballot. And I think she should be there at that debate tonight, and she would have brought something that we're not going to hear. We're going to hear three candidates who really have pretty much, pretty similar views on the main issues. And I think that's a shame that there's no one to offer a different opinion, a different outlook, because that's what we need. We need that in Ireland at the minute more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really interesting that Marie Sherlock of the Labour Party was saying she believes that the race is pretty much representative of the range of views that are out there. And by that, she was, of course, referring to the fact that there are two government candidates and a left-wing or arguably far-left candidate. That apparently is representative of the entire spectrum of beliefs that the general public hold. And a lot of people have made a big deal out of the fact that Maria started her candidacy relatively late. She tried to put herself forward in the last number of weeks, and they say, oh, well, sure, that's not enough time. Clearly she wasn't serious, and the reason she didn't get on is because she didn't run in a way that was competent, basically, and that it's her fault and it's something to do with the system or anything like that. But the problem with that is people like Gareth Sheridan and people like Nick Delahanty started way before Maria, months ago, and neither of them managed to gain access. And I personally just think it's crazy that county councils didn't nominate anyone. Forget about my preferred candidate and your preferred candidate and whoever, the people watching this, we all have in our minds who we think would be the best person for the job. But the fact that they wouldn't nominate a single person is just madness to me. Even if it was somebody that I don't personally agree with, at least you'd be opening it up to give a bigger range of options. But the fact that they heard pitches from various people and just said, nah, I don't think so. I'm not going to I'm not going to give that person even an opportunity to participate in the race, I think is somewhat absurd.
I think it's shocked people. Like, people have seen, like, politics, like, it really is a closed shop. And you look at, people like Delahanty and Sheridan, and they've kind of gone under the radar, I suppose, because I think Maria Steen, she kind of, I suppose, almost represented the last chance that we had of getting an independent candidate on the ballot. But as you said, they were so organised. They, especially I think Gareth Sheridan, Nick Delahanty as well, and, ran incredible campaigns. You've got Delahanty, he's become really well known for talking about the whole iPass situation, really exposing things that people are talking about in this country, and he's brought a lot of things to light.
Like, sorry to say, but just on that, like, he just had one of his stories kind of robbed by, I think, RTE and Sinn Féin. They were talking about the 100,000 bike shed at the National Maternity Hospital. That was a Nick Delahanty story, and people just kind of nicked it without credit. But this is becoming his kind of forte, is coming out with these sorts of things, which are clearly of importance to people.
But they were both the completely qualified candidates. Maria Steen, obviously, totally qualified, and she's a barrister, she's an architect, and I think it's just, I saw a tweet earlier that it's so funny that you have the Irish Times constantly referring to her and other papers as, a stay-at-home mother, and that's the only way they refer to her. Like, she is qualified as a stay-at-home mother, as a teacher in her own right, but also as a really professional woman, and someone who I think people are so sad because they see any of those candidates would have represented Ireland really well on the world stage. And this is a job where it's not actually, it's not technically a political job. They've got no constitutional power as the president, but it's having that unifying figure, that charismatic figure, someone who's going to unite people. And I don't see any of the three candidates that we have at a time when Ireland is so divided having the power to bring any kind of unity. But I think the biggest problem is that the debate is just going to be so poor, and it's going to be so worse off. I think Maria Steen on her worst day would have really outshone any of those three candidates tonight. And I just think it's so disappointing. There's a real sense of disappointment that she hasn't been given that chance.
Well, I think regardless of whether she would have won the debate or she would have done, like, it would have just, as we've said, made it that much more interesting. Like, personally, I'm a politics junkie. Like, I love politics. I was into politics before I was doing this job, which is why I'm doing this job, is because, I think most people watching this, we all probably have an interest in politics. I almost would be tempted to skip the debate if I didn't have to watch it and review it for work. It's like, it's not something that I'm excited to check out because...
Yeah, there's no excitement.
I mean, what are Jim Gavin and Heather Humphreys going to argue about? I mean, they're kind of constrained even in the fact that they're in government together, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, so they can't even really attack each other that harshly. And, I think there's going to be a lot of people. I'd love to see the viewership figures after the fact to see how many people actually tuned in relative to other debates that we've had previously, because I think people really struggle to care, not just about the debates, but about the race as a whole. I'm going to be really curious to see the turnout when this thing comes to fruition.
And we'd Senator Michael McDowell in the interview at the weekend saying that, one of the comments he made was that Maria Steen was too divisive. I think that was the word, divisive a candidate. Like, that is just incredible. This idea that we have in Ireland now that politics should not be divisive. I mean, that is insane. That is what politics is. It's this idea that you bring ideas into the marketplace and people debate those ideas and we have a discussion on that, and now it's just total conformity. And I mean, I really don't understand why he said that, in the sense that, he obviously was one of the figureheads in the no campaign in the referendums last year. I mean, that could be seen as very, very divisive, especially if it hadn't gone his way. So, I think it's just people
that's such a good and important point. And I've mentioned before how, like, you hear about polarization and how it's really dangerous that society is being polarized, but poles are just sides. Like, a magnet has two poles, or the earth has, like, the North Pole and the South Pole. So when you talk about polarization, all you're saying is you have two different sides that think very differently and who have very different worldviews. I thought that's the essence of debate and having a free society, that you're going to have different sides that have different views. Like, why is that a bad thing? Why are we scared of that exactly? I don't understand. Like, it's this thing that people just say, and they don't really think about what they're saying and what is even the criticism, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's just like, just let her run. Let an independent candidate run. Obviously a nomination, it was never an endorsement. But it's just that now I think it just feels so disappointing today, because the interest in this election, I think, will just nosedive. I think even so many people on the left, friends I know who are pretty left leaning, like even they are raging about the fact that Maria's not going to be there and we're not going to hear what she has to say. Like, I think people are still interested. They're interested in the other point of view. They want a democracy. They want, competing ideas. They want to have discussions, and it's going to bring a bit of color. It's going to make things more lively, and it's just so boring. And I think the voter turnout will probably be, I would say, quite low, that it will suffer because of this. And we'll see, like, we'll know more tomorrow in terms of the debate and the viewership, but I wouldn't say it's going to be like a huge, I don't know. I know it's the first debate, so probably will be well watched, but it's just, yeah, the interest for me is, it's not there. And I know we're journalists. I know this is what we do and this is what we analyze, but it just feels there's just a bit of a deflation today. I think the momentum is kind of gone out of it a little bit.
Well, I think it's really going to be a Pyrrhic victory for them, in the sense that they have successfully managed to prevent Maria from getting on the ballot, but there's every possibility that Maria would not have won. Like that's a very, I think she could have won. I wouldn't rule that out either, but it's possible that she could lose. I mean, that's perfectly plausible and believable. And if she had, then all of her supporters would have kind of taken a hit in morale, and people would have said, oh, well, maybe we don't have the kind of cultural or political momentum that we thought, and so on. And so that would have been good from the government's perspective. But instead, by blocking her, you kind of create this, like, a martyrdom almost, where it's like, oh, you see, we would have won. There's going to be people out there who are thinking, oh, you see, we would have won, and you knew that, and you were scared, so you blocked her, and for that reason, and so it kind of, it continues to give the sort of anti-establishment or dissident right a momentum that wouldn't have been there otherwise.
And so, in a way, I think, like, this is technically, it's kind of like the second best thing that could have happened to her, in a way, because it's making people kind of sit up and have those conversations. But even the culture, I just think this country, we really need conversations about the culture, about society, about where we're headed. I saw one of the tweets, it was Waterford Whispers, which is obviously satire, but it was a picture of Maria Steen and her husband, and like, it was actually people were saying this is quite funny, even if I'm on the right, but it was them walking through the Dublin portal, and it was like Maria Steen, she goes back to 1950 with her views, she's through the portal, but it's like, that is a good conversation to have. It's like, our family values, like, are they backwards? Are they 1950s? Do they actually have a place in society? Like, I think that would have been such a great conversation for us to have as a country, as a nation. Like, do we need to bring back, conservatism and morality? Like, we never have conversations on morality or sexual morality or anything. And like, that would have been really good for people. But yeah, we're not going to have those conversations. Of course we're not.
And I mean, there's going to be about, I'll put it this way, about 720,000 or so people voted no to gay marriage, and that was 10 years ago, which is not ancient history. That is very recent. And then about the same amount, around 730,000 or so people voted no to abortion in 2018. So that was only 7 years ago. So within the last decade, about a third of the electorate have reliably voted no to social liberal issues of various natures. So we could say that about a third of the electorate, even if you let's say you lop off some of that because you say, oh, well, maybe a lot of those were older people and some of those have died in the intervening period. Okay, first of all, it wasn't that long. But second of all, even if you take off a chunk of that, that's still a huge amount of people. That's hundreds of thousands of people. And like Michael D. Higgins, when he won the first time in 2011, he got about 600,000 first preference votes. Mm-hmm. So if Maria got anything like that, I'm not saying she'd win by default, because obviously then you have transfers and things like that, which would influence how the race went from there. But it would definitely put her up there. And so again, it's just bizarre to me that if you have traditional values, and if you are socially conservative, you're treated like an absolutely irrelevant lunatic who, like, your views have been comprehensively rejected because you guys lost a couple of referendums and we don't need to listen to you, and you're, you know, a totally fringe figure. A third of the electorate is not fringe. You can lose a referendum, and that is still a huge minority. 1 in 3 voters walking around hold these views. So the fact that that is to be excluded from public life is madness, in my view.
And I think even like say 10 years ago, I don't, or even like in 2018, I don't think Maria Steen would have even had as good a chance of getting the level of public support that she's gotten this time around, because I think there's increased alienation in this country from voters from about a whole range of issues, like a whole range of things. That's only growing worse and worse. And now there are just a whole swathe of people who, you know, come October 24th, they just have no one to vote for on that ballot. And it's absolutely crazy. And I think it just evidences what has happened, has evidenced the fact that politicians, the establishment politicians, those who go around the country knocking on doors for votes, they know how alienated people are. They are absolutely terrified of putting someone out there who would maybe, you know, be an alternative, so they're not going to get the votes. So I think they're running scared of having conversations, of talking about how people in this country are really feeling right now.
Like, how many people do you know, Maria, who, and probably some of them are watching this podcast right now, how many people have you heard who voted for gay marriage 10 years ago and who were like, yeah, you know, whatever, I'm a liberal. If you want to do what you want to do with your partner, that's nothing to do with me. I don't really care. And now, having been exposed to 10 years of radical transgender ideology, having this stuff pushed relentlessly in schools, having seeing their workplace and streets carpet bombed and pride flags and having that shoved down their throat, they've kind of just gone off the whole LGBT movement, and they're kind of like, look, you guys are zealots and I kind of don't have time for this anymore. You're trying to put hate speech laws through and enforce madness on my children, drag queen story hour and all this. And like, there's that is not an insignificant amount of people trying to have biological males in sports and things. There are lots of people who voted for some of these social referenda who now are having cold feet and thinking, yeah, I don't know what I signed up for here. And that is, I'm not going to say it's a majority. I'm not going to say that's everyone, but there are people who think like that now.
Even in social settings, when you tell people what you do, and I think back like 5 years ago, you would have been kind of having conservative views a bit of an outlier. But now I see the gap actually really, really closing, because people can see just the level of totalitarianism behind so much of this ideology, so much of, you know, what shapes government policy, that we all have to think the same. I think a lot of people are stepping out of the boxes and they want to have conversations. And even online, you see it all the time. You see people who even voted for repeal back in 2018, looking at some of the stories. Like, I write quite a lot about abortion, for example, the abortion figures and different things that have happened in this country since repeal, and ethical issues. Like, I enjoy writing about all that kind of side of things. And so many people will write to you and will tell you, I voted for repeal, I voted for abortion, and I believed in that, and now I see where that agenda has brought us, and we're not having a conversation about the outcomes. And it's the same like with a whole range of issues. There's just a closed shop. There's no room for talking about any of these things. And it's just so depressing that we're still not having that conversation. It's 2025.
Well, speaking of things that are unfortunate for society, we might briefly touch on the fact that the NFL held one of their matches. This is the American Football League in America, that they obviously have a huge connection to Ireland, many Americans, and they love their sports and they love their Irish heritage. And so in a kind of a crossover episode, they wanted to have a match between, I don't know, these American teams all have goofy names. I think it was the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Toilet Bowls. I don't know what. I'm honestly not familiar with all the various teams they have over there. I've never watched one American football match in my life. But regardless, they had the match here, and it was supposed to be this big moment of promoting the country.
Yeah.
And during the game or during the preparation for the game, one of their lead players was mugged essentially in Dublin city centre by some random criminal. And so this is the latest in a long string of tourists being attacked or robbed or otherwise victimized after coming here. And now it's happening to a high profile celebrity who has come to visit Ireland. So I can think of better ads for the country, frankly. I'm not sure that one's going to make it into the Fáilte Ireland promo for the next summer, but what do you think this is going to do potentially to our tourism prospects going forward?
I think it's just like we had such a good chance to showcase Ireland in a good light. And, at a time when tourism in this country has just nosedived, tourism is really suffering. Um, Businesses are struggling to stay open. You see loads of well-known businesses in Dublin closing. Um, like businesses that have been open for 30, 40 years and, they say the areas are not safe. People are not going to these areas. And this is just, once again, I mean, it shows the fact that things have just broken down so much in the capital city. Law and order has broken down. We actually had Jim O'Callaghan, the Justice Minister, he responded to this today. And he kind of had a statement. He said, we're a country of 1.2 million people, 1.3 million people. In Dublin, capital, 1.3 million people. There's going to be like 250k people in Dublin at any time. It's really hard to police a capital city. These things happen everywhere. I felt like he was kind of trying to downplay the incident. And there obviously is a risk when things like this happen of overplaying it, of downplaying it. But like, it's just yet another example. And if you have this, this professional football player, this guy in his late 20s is, him being attacked, jumped and mugged, what chance do like women stand of going into Dublin city centre? This was on Friday evening, I think. Like, it's just shocking. Like, none of us stand a chance in the capital if this is happening to someone like that. It's just a huge, huge problem, and no one wants to tackle the issue of law and order and the crime in Dublin. It's just not a conversation. I think since Helen McEntee's kind of walkabout when she was flanked by the guards and was saying Dublin is so safe, I think since then it was so laughable that none of our politicians really want to talk about this. No one in government anyway. And we have it, time and time again, the same issue coming up. I remember actually, was it in September? We had Pope Leo, the new Pope, said the same thing about Dublin. He came out and said, when I was in Dublin 10 years ago, I don't know if he was mugged, but he was attacked, robbed, whatever. Like, same thing. So we are gaining really fast this international reputation for just being, a dangerous country, a bit of a kip. That's our capital city. It should be somewhere where we can be proud of, where we know people are going to be safe. Obviously things happen, but there's been a deterioration. Like, anyone you talk to, if I talk to anyone and I tell them, our office is in Dublin, I'm down in Dublin quite a bit, every single person will just say Dublin has gone really downhill and it's dangerous. Like, that's the reputation that it's gained in the north. Like, for us, even, I think, like, growing up, going to Dublin was such a real novelty thing, like a really exciting kind of experience to go to Dublin, to go to Croke Park for a game, that kind of thing. Now it's like people can't get far away enough from it. So yeah, it's just another example of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, and it's one of those things where the government has continually tried to convince us that it's not more dangerous, and they'll point to things like crime statistics, and they will. And by the way, we've kind of debunked the whole idea that Dublin has not become more dangerous. Gary Kavanagh, our colleague, did a huge analysis on this where he went back over CSO's crime stats going back 20 years. And while certain crimes are down, like murder, for example, that's largely due to criminals, like gangs are less likely to kill each other now for various reasons. And you might think, oh, well, isn't that a good thing? And of course it is a good thing. But the issue there is gangs usually only kill each other. Like, if you're a law-abiding citizen who's just minding your own business, the odds that you're going to be killed in a gang feud are very, very small. It's still obviously bad when it happens. We don't want anybody to be killing anybody. However, it doesn't really affect ordinary people that much necessarily if one gangster shoots another gangster. Whereas the problem here is the kinds of crimes that have increased over the last 20 years are ones that will affect you, like people drink driving at a higher rate, people taking drugs more in public places. So if like everyone on your street becomes a crackhead, that's going to have a big impact on you, and robbery and burglary and things like this. So with that said, the government will say, oh, well, really, this is just a myth that crime is out of control, because when you look at the statistics, it doesn't show that. First of all, it kind of does show that. But second of all, you're trying to gaslight people into not believing their lying eyes. Like, I am telling you, I don't live in Dublin anymore. I did until a few
Your
months
whole
ago.
life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like when I'm walking up the street, I don't feel safe in the city center.
No.
Many people will attest to this. Depending on where you live, obviously, like Dublin's a huge place. There's going to be a difference in how you feel in Rathmines versus how you feel in Tala. We all understand this, but in large parts of the city, it feels more dangerous. You feel apprehensive and like there is a cloud of intimidation hanging over your head. You can't show me CSO crime stats and say that's not real. It is real. And these anecdotes, while they are just anecdotes, you could say, oh, well, that's just a handful of cases. Why do they keep happening? Why do we keep hearing about these kinds of high-profile incidents if it's so rare? It seems like these rare events are happening all the time.
And also, like, so much of this kind of low-level crime, it just seems the case that it can keep happening because the actual prospects of someone being punished seems so low. The courts let so many people off. I think it's like really, the problem is sentencing structure in the courts, as well as just a lack of visible policing. And you're more likely because, obviously Fatima covers so many of these court cases, and the sentencing is definitely an issue because you're so much more likely to see these kinds of characters with like 60 convictions against their name wandering around the streets. No one's going to do anything about them. They're all out in the loose. And so you've got that issue. I think one of the issues is sentencing. The courts in that sense, that's an issue. And until something's kind of done about sentencing, I think this kind of low level criminality will keep increasing. And also, like, if you go to any European city, I think this is the thing that always strikes you. Like, I remember being in Barcelona, and you go to Krakow, you go to any of these popular European destinations, and there is such a visible presence of police. Like, it's very, very clear that the police are there to protect the people. It's very much law and order driven. Whereas in Ireland, you just don't see that in Dublin. I remember being in Dublin on St. Patrick's Day, and like, you could walk for, this was last year, you could walk for half an hour, like, without seeing a guard in some places. And like, that is a huge issue. So for the Justice Minister to kind of come out and play down the fears and say, we're doing our best, crime is decreasing, we have, great guard of visibility. I don't think people actually really buy that, because I don't see the guards when I'm in Dublin, like in the city centre. And you just have these high profile incidents like Pope Leo, and now this NFL player. It's on the NFL's website. Like, what an ad for Ireland to put out there. Like, a really great opportunity to kind of breathe a bit of life into Dublin, to promote ourselves. You see, like, London, all these, cities do it all the time, put their best foot forward. Great opportunity for Ireland, and look what it's kind of ended in.
Yeah, I'm sure the tourism minister is delighted with that as a great addition to the country's image. You have the Dublin to New York portal where people are flashing the camera and showing 9/11 memes to New Yorkers and things, and now we have you can't even touch Molly Malone's breasts anymore without being spear tackled by security, and now this. So what's the point in even coming here anymore?
No, I know. And like, I did see some things online, like people from, I had a quick look at this story earlier, and people that had come over for the game were really praising like people in Ireland for being so welcoming and being so friendly. Like, there is that side of it where a lot of the time people come to Ireland and they actually have a great experience. And I think we're reading so many of the headlines about the crime and about the things that are going on that it's just like, gosh, it must be miserable. So I think you can come over and you can enjoy it, but we need to take this stuff seriously, because it's not going to get it's not going to get any better. I think if Dublin is gained such a bad reputation with us, like as Irish people, it's going to catch up internationally. It's going to just grow and grow and grow. And I mean, it's very hard to look at those incidents and kind of to look around and say, well, who else do we blame? But those politicians who have been in charge for so long, like that's where the finger of blame does lie, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for watching. As I say, apologies for Jason's absence. He's on holiday and hopefully we'll be back next week. Thank you so much to Maria for filling in his absence. She's always the old reliable, and we
And the
love her.
backup.
I know. I believe our podcast the last time was one of the most viewed ones we've ever done. So clearly the viewers love you, as do all of us here at Gript, Maria. And we will be back after the next debate, and hopefully we'll be able to do a kind of a review on that. But for the time being, catch you all next week in the next episode. God bless.